We're going to have a repeat. Allison Baller from the Fed is going to talk more about FedNow.
Great, thank you. All righty. Thank you, everyone, for taking the next 20-25 minutes or so here to talk about FedNow, and appreciate all the collaboration to date across the industry, helping us bring this to market. It certainly takes a village as we work together here. What I'd like to do is maybe just start out by sharing a little bit about what FedNow is for those that may not be aware of the capabilities. And then I'd like to talk about where it is that we are in this journey, and then what you as a financial institution or a fintech or another player in the market, a business, et cetera, should do to prepare. So that's what we're going to cover over the next 15, 20 minutes or so. So the FedNow service actually was brought to market, or is being brought to market, between May and July of 2023. So it's right around the corner. And it's really an exciting time as we get out into the market and continue to talk with financial institutions and credit unions and processors to help them understand what they need to do to be ready for that initial launch. And we've designed the service on a cloud architecture, which we were just talking about some of the benefits of that. And as I understand it, that's pretty unique to central banks. So that is certainly an exciting aspect of the service. But in terms of what the service has or offers relative to differentiation, there are a couple aspects of it that are unique. One is, of course, because we're the central bank, the settlement occurs right in the master account of the financial institutions that are participating. And it does not require pre-funding in the accounts or through a joint account. So that's one distinct difference. In addition to that, we understand that there's going to be needs. This is a 24/7/365 system. So we understand that there's going to be needs for liquidity. So we are rolling out a liquidity management tool that will be up and running and available to those that subscribe to it off hours. So when FedWire is down, off hours, holidays, weekends, et cetera, that'll be available. And then the third distinct feature is that we are enabling the service to be leveraged for correspondents and respondents. So that's been another area that certainly is taking a lot of collaboration to determine the best way we can support that piece of the market, but certainly an important one. So maybe I'm going to attempt to play a video here and see if this works. And if it doesn't, we'll keep going on with some slides. But let's see if we can make this work.
In today's fast-paced world, time is money. More people, businesses, and organizations are demanding instant payments. That's why the Federal Reserve is developing the FedNow service, a safe and efficient instant payments infrastructure that will modernize the U.S. payment system. The FedNow service will give financial institutions the opportunity to innovate, enabling their customers to send and receive money in seconds, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Funds will settle between financial institutions in real time, which means there's no buildup of interbank obligations, and end users will have access to the funds in seconds. How will the FedNow service work? Imagine the owner of a coffee shop is running low on coffee beans and needs to schedule a quick delivery. She places an order, and the coffee bean company sends her a request for payment. She responds to the request for payment and pays for the coffee beans right then and there through an app from her credit union, which uses the FedNow service. Once she initiates the payment, her credit union screens the payment and sends an ISO 20022 compliant payment message, either directly or through a service provider to the FedNow service over the Federal Reserve's FedLine network. The FedNow service instantly validates the payment message and passes it along to the coffee bean supplier's bank. In real time, the supplier's bank confirms to the FedNow service that it intends to accept the payment, In the FedNow service, debits and credits the master accounts of both the shop owners and the Coffee Bean suppliers' financial institutions or the master accounts of their correspondents. The FedNow service also immediately sends a payment message with an advice of credit to the supplier's bank and notifies the shop owner's credit union that settlement is complete. Finally, the supplier's bank credits the supplier's account in near real time, making the funds available. The supplier's bank will have the option of sending a confirmation to the shop owner's credit union that the payment has been posted to the supplier's account, providing the coffee shop owner with certainty that the payment was received. The FedNow service will be designed to be flexible and support a broad range of potential use cases. Banks, credit unions, and other industry providers can use it as a springboard for innovation to support a range of applications such as account-to-account transfers and bill pay. For example, now imagine it's after hours and the shop owner gets a reminder that her car insurance bill is due today. She may be able to avoid a late fee by initiating a bill payment in her credit union app and selecting to pay it now. Later, she repays a friend for a pizza they shared using an app provided by her credit union that clears and settles through the FedNow service. With this service, banks and credit unions can remain competitive by offering the type of payment options customers increasingly expect in today's fast-paced world. The FedNow service will support flexible adoption, allowing financial institutions the option to work with aggregators, processors, and correspondents to adopt the service. Banks and credit unions will also have the option to adopt the full set of FedNow capabilities or sign on as a receive-only participant. The initial launch of the FedNow service will focus on core clearing and settlement capabilities. Additional features will be released in phases to meet evolving industry demands and changes in technology. Get ready for the FedNow service. Learn more at fednow.org.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a good explanation at a high level of what the service is going to be offering. Definitely there's a need in the market for instant payments. We've been talking about it all morning, and I'd like to just add that earlier this year we released some survey results that show that consumers indeed want faster payments, specifically to pay businesses. 4 out of 5 actually quote that as a need, and they're interested in using in actually moving more towards leveraging faster payments for that need. So the adoption curve is expected to go up on that. And in addition, consumers also noted in the survey that an important satisfaction driver for choosing their bank and working with their bank is that bank or financial institution credit union offering instant payments. So we think there'll be an increasing need, but certainly, work to do to make this happen. And from a business perspective, the data is also probably not very surprising. There's a tremendous need in the business market to actually roll out new use cases for faster payments. We talked a little bit on the panel this morning about the whole notion and flexibility and ability to actually make immediate payments for just-in-time supplies, as an example, which is particularly important for smaller businesses, medium-sized enterprises as well, that might be a little bit more tight on cash flow. So the ability to be able to manage your cash flow and streamline that aspect of it is going to drive a tremendous amount of value. And then, not to talk too much about the panel this morning, but I think we've talked a lot initially about this value of tying the messaging with the invoice and the data to the payment and trying to work towards driving straight through processing. And that's going to not happen certainly overnight, because there's a lot of complexity, particularly in the B2B space, to enable that. But we are certainly working across the industry to try to understand the best way to drive towards enabling those types of solutions. From a use case perspective, we often get the question, what use cases is FedNow going to support day one? And the answer is, we're providing the payment rail, so it is use case agnostic, and we're certainly looking to the industry to innovate on top of those payment rails, as well as not only in partnership with the banks and service providers, but merchants, fintechs, et cetera. What we are seeing is a lot of excitement around the A to A use case. Many institutions feel that that's a really good starting point. There's also interest in the business to person payments. So we've had discussions with merchants, as an example, who are interested in trying to move towards instant payment channels to help with rebates and also refunds and things of that nature. So we're exploring that across a list of partners that are in the value chain to try to determine the best way to roll that out early on when the system launches. So that's certainly exciting. And collaboration, we talked a lot about that today, is really important across the ecosystem. The other question that we often get is, who's able to connect to the network? Who's eligible? And if you look at the right side of the chart, you'll see that we have payment service providers and financial institutions. And those that are enabled and connected and qualified to have a FedLine connection actually are the ones that can connect into the service. So if you're a service provider, as an example, you can work with us to qualify, assuming you have a sponsor bank behind the scenes that can be serving as your agent. So that's on the connectivity side. But what we're also doing is working very, very closely with the broader ecosystem. And in fact, we've even announced a lot of collaboration with the ecosystem, in particular on the fintech side, as well as larger technology providers. So what we're seeing in the market that I find really interesting is that when we're talking to financial institutions, they're asking us a lot of questions about who do you recommend and who should we go to and who's going to be first on the service. And what we generally do is point them to a portfolio of companies that are available on a site that we have. We're not endorsing them necessarily, but they have interest and offerings and solutions around the FedNow service. And so I can show you a screenshot of that a little bit later, but that's certainly a good starting point if you're looking for vendors and providers there. And then the other thing, did you have a question?
So in the, if I'm reading between the lines, the larger picture of people doing paid, the brands, so to speak, like the PayPals in the world and Venmos, et cetera, there's a benefit to them if they participate in the FedNow pipeline.
So yes, there is benefit to the broader ecosystem with that example that you mentioned. So if you're, let's say, a wallet provider and you want to basically have your particular front-end application, clear and set on instant payment rail, then you would collaborate with your bank to actually enable that.
It effectively opens up the payment channel to a much broader set of providers and payers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even though, from not to make fun of the consumer, but on the consumer side, I think the consumers are still trying to understand what the payment rails mean and what it really means, who's providing, that service through the app. But absolutely, it opens up, and we're very, very keen to work with the broader ecosystem to drive additional value-added services, whether it's, on the front end through wallet applications or pay by bank and the like. Sure. So the other thing I'll just mention in terms of ecosystem value that we're really excited about, we recently announced that the Treasury joined our pilot program within the FedNow. And so we are actively working with them. We don't have details yet on exactly the use cases that they'll be delivering first when we come to market, but really excited on both the payments front and the revenue collections front as well, payments management and revenue collection. So a lot of excitement there on the Treasury side. Yes, U.S. Treasury, sorry. I'm getting comfortable working at the Fed, I forget. So there are a tremendous amount of attributes that we are bringing to market with the initial release 1 of the service. I'm not going to go into, all of them in detail, but one of the things that I did want to mention was that there's a tremendous amount of flexibility in the platform and the service. And I might have alluded to this earlier, but it's good, and it's also challenging as well, because there's a lot of decisions that the financial institutions, the credit unions need to make, particularly those that haven't really, basically tried to dip their toe in the water around instant payments. So a lot of discussions around, well, should I start with receive only? Should I do send versus receive? Should I accept, RFPs day one? So a lot of discussions in the market around making some of these decisions up front. And that's all part of the onboarding process that we're working with our service providers on, as well as the direct banks, to help them enable themselves to make those decisions, and then from a downstream perspective, architect those solutions essentially and enable them to bring those initial offerings to market on behalf of their customers. I'm going to skip over the RFP aspect because we've talked a fair amount about that, but I will just mention that we will have the RFP capabilities day one on the FedNow service. And there's a lot of excitement around this as well. We are going to be publishing the routing transit numbers, which will support RFP capabilities for those on the service. But not every account, of course, will be eligible. And so we're also going to be rolling out the functionality that will enable you to send a non-value message and essentially an inquiry to determine if the particular payee is actually participating in the RFP. So that's one particular aspect that we're going to be bringing to market. And then we have a fair amount of capabilities that allow for partial pay, requests for more information, requests for additional time, et cetera, so that we are working through the best way to actually understand the better customer experience to deliver in the market around all these capabilities, because number one, there's so many options, but there's so many business models as well. And so that's where we just launched an RFP work group, and we're going to be sharing those results as we get them in. But it's a combination of merchants and banks and fintechs across the value chain. And so we're excited to continue to share the feedback that we get from the market to try to work towards enabling more transaction in the RFP space and more adoption overall. Three things from a fraud perspective that are going to be up and running at launch. Transaction limits are going to be set at 500,000 as the max. That'll be the cap, and the default will be set at 100,000. And then you do obviously have the ability to adjust that based on your customer needs, your business needs, et cetera. We are also making a participant negative list capability available to the service that financial institutions can actually leverage, and in which case, if the account numbers are on there, then we will be blocking the funds to and from those accounts specified. And then finally, we are requiring reporting of fraud. There are a number of other fraud capabilities that we are working to roll out as quickly as possible. Details on those are going to be coming in subsequent releases, but it's definitely a very high priority for us. And then, of course, as we talked about earlier this morning, I mean, this whole notion of collaboration in the industry to understand, how can we help educate, the consumers to understand fraud and even just the value, but the challenges of instant payments, and how can we support and continue to work with the financial institutions to ensure that you all and credit unions as well actually have the ability to get their fraud systems up to speed to accommodate the real-time 24/7 by 365, because that's quite an adjustment in some cases from the batch world of doing business. And then we're also collaborating, more broadly with other networks to figure out, if there might be potential ways that we can start learning and sharing information to essentially work together to combat the fraud. So in terms of future product releases, there's been a lot of questions around directory or alias-based payments. So we are also working very hard and diligently on working to roll this out as a fast follower as well. We often get a lot of questions around this specifically. We're not looking to recreate the wheel on this, but rather to once again collaborate across the industry and determine, where are there gaps in the market where we might be able to bring forward an alias-based payment directory today, but also how can we work in a federated manner with other existing directories to bring value to the overall market. So that's certainly an exciting development and more to come on that. Then we're also going to continue to look to figure out how we can beef up, if you will, the remittance information and capabilities to support B2B payments, as we talked about earlier. That's a really complex issue. So I'm not going to take you through the whole payment flow. I don't want to put you all to sleep on this, but I did want to just mention one of the questions we got early on, we're getting it less and less now, is what does the experience look like? What's the front end app? What's the user experience? And we're not providing the user experience. So the end user interfaces that are referenced here on the send and receive side, those are the responsibility of service providers, technology providers, financial institutions, et cetera. So we're simply providing the payment rail in the middle. So I'll just point that out. And that whole transaction, as I believe was alluded to in the video, occurs within about 20 seconds. But there's a tremendous amount of message validation, secure message validation that happens back and forth in that 20 seconds. So let me just wrap up here by explaining a little bit more about how you as an organization can begin preparing. And obviously, those of you that are live with the private sector version might have a little bit of a head start in terms of understanding, how to actually adapt your business and get your business ready for instant payments. But break it down at a super, super high level into 4 or 5 different areas. One is really understanding, from a use case perspective, from a business value perspective, what do your customers need? Which customers do you want to target? What are those products that you're going to be bringing to market that can be enabled by instant payments? And then who are your providers in your ecosystem? So how are you going to adapt fraud? Which front end are you going to use? Who's going to be providing that? Are you going to develop it in-house? Or are you going to use a current mobile online banking vendor? That aspect of tying out with your vendors is also extremely important. And then, of course, operationally getting ready to support 24/7 by 365. And technically, so we've, working with the pilot, which has about 120 institutions, what we've found is, it's not easy to connect, but you can go through the processes and connect and set up all your systems. But then there's still a tremendous amount of work to do on the bank side, oftentimes, to set up technically to be ready and enabled. And so we're continuing to support the banks and financial institutions from that perspective. And then finally, on the go-to-market side, we've brought forward a fair amount of education material and marketing material, and that, of course, is available to you all to leverage. But that's at a high level, some of the things to think about when you're trying to determine, are you ready to move forward in instant payments if you're not already there? If you're already there, then, of course, it raises the questions that we, again, chatted about earlier this morning. Who makes the decision on where to route the payment, things of that nature. But we're certainly excited to have an additional payment rail coming to market. So quickly on price points, this is all available. So if you want more details, I can make sure that you get access to this, or you can just even Google it because it's been out on press releases. But $25 monthly fee, that's per RTN, 4.5-cent credit transfer fee, and a penny for request for payment. And we did just, I believe last week or the week before, announce that we are going to be waiving some of these initial fees for 2023. So we'll be waiving the monthly fee, and then the first 25,000 credit transactions per month per institution will also be waived. So looking for early adopters to join the party here and work with us. Then there's additional pricing around liquidity management that I had mentioned earlier. So I've talked about the pilot program. We are actually in testing now with many of the participants. We also are working actively with what we call fast followers, early adopters that have not been part of the pilot, but are advanced and excited and ready to go. So if you're in that camp, we are certainly happy to talk to you about how we can collaborate with you to get you ready for that May to July timeframe or shortly thereafter. But we just appreciate all the collaboration through the pilot. It's been really instrumental in helping us shape the product and the service. And we've made adjustments along the way, and we plan to continue to do that as we roll out new releases based on market feedback. So just to wrap up, this is a picture of one site called the FedNow Explorer, which has just a tremendous amount of content on it. I would highly recommend, if you want more information, to go there. If you are interested in technical specs and technical details, it's kind of a virtual city. There's a tech tower in there. You can also find the service provider showcase, which I mentioned earlier, which has visibility into 100+ service providers and vendors, and certainly open to have others join that as well. And then finally, we have the ability to sign up for the FedNow community, and also to join our email list in terms of, getting the regular updates on where we are with the service and the like. So happy to take any questions. I think we are just about at time.
So it was mentioned with the clearinghouse around needing consensus around warranty, or is it enable? Is it a similar case for FedNow, or are you more mature in that space?
Yeah, so basically, what I'd like to do is make sure I point you to the operating rules that we've recently released, and suggest that you work with your legal counsel in terms of the specifics around that. But yes, it's similar in the sense that, we're requiring that if you send, for example, a request for payment, that's actually, there's a valid business reason. You're warranting that it is a valid transaction there. And then we do, as I think I might have touched on, we have, a fair amount of capabilities in terms of non-value messages to start to tap in and understand more information. But on the legal and policy side, I can share all the details we have around that if you'd like. Sure.
Hi, CJ Joseph, Bank United. And I hope I didn't miss this first question I want to ask. Did you share how many banks are participating in terms of pilots?
So 120-ish. I said ish because there's a handful that are not being publicly named.
Okay.
All those banks that wanted to be, and service providers, part of the pilot, which has been going on for the last couple years, I can give you the link. They're all listed. And then I often get the next question, how many are going to be live? Is that where you were going?
That wasn't it, but
So
let's do
someone
that too.
behind you is that I know, hey Pat, is asking that question. So I hope a lot. I hope as many as possible and more. That said, look, candidly speaking, our pilot group was a really diverse mix of financial institutions and service providers. So we really kind of anticipated from the beginning that maybe not all of them would be on board to go live during that initial, stage production rollout that we're launching shortly. And indeed, I think that's going to be the case. Now, hopefully, we'll make that up with some fast followers here. But look, we're working hard. We have a huge dependency on the service providers. So if you're a service provider in the market, let's talk, because I think there's more collectively we can do. Not to be a salesperson up here, but I will anyways, to work together and really collaborate to get that long tail. But hopefully that answers your question on the pilot.
Last one I had, I promise it's the last one, is I heard you say the limit was $500,000. Are there thoughts or timeline around getting that to $1 million to match RTP?
So thoughts, yes. Timeline, not yet. So we're going to start with this and then see where we go from here in terms of feedback from the market. You can, though, send, if you need to send more than that, you can send it a couple different times, a couple instant payments if you have, larger transaction. So that's one way of not necessarily getting around it completely, but managing the rail to your business needs in the short term.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you all.